Some of the more interesting things that happened to me while living in racist communities was being hit on by racist males. I want to clarify that when I say racist, I'm referring to a racist white person, not all white people. I don't believe that all white people are racist or are hiding racist tendencies. Racist or racism is a subculture of the white ethnicity, similar to how hood rats are a subculture of African Americans. I never understood the hypocrisy of racists thinking that blacks are beneath them, yet some would date or even have sex with blacks. There have been times when I suspected someone of being racist and he would respond, "I have a black girlfriend," with a smirk. I admit that let him off the hook, but his actions still reeked of racism. There was no explanation for that until I had the chance to live in a racist community for many years and was able to see the racist and ignorant blacks who were raised in that environment. By observing them, I realized that someone could be racist and have a black girlfriend or boyfriend. One reason is the confusing ideology of racists where blacks are beneath them, but not when it comes to sex and sometimes relationships. It's similar to how misogynists view females as beneath them or submissive, and is submissive the right word? Inferior. Yeah, that's the word. It's similar to how misogynists view females as beneath them or inferior, but necessary for sex and relationships. The other reason is that there are ignorant black people who buy into racist ideology to a certain level and would date racists. I have no idea why. Maybe they think the racists see them as an exception or maybe something else. These blacks, whether male or female, allow the racists to get away with racist acts and prevents them from being called out because, after all, she or he has a black girlfriend, a black boyfriend, and or mixed kids. I have been hit on by guys who I suspected had racist tendencies but couldn't really prove it. When I moved into an apartment house full of racist and prejudiced whites, I had a real life experience of being hit on by racists. The first incident was when the maintenance guy made a racist comment. I was driven to poverty by the recession and stalking, so I was renting a room in an apartment in a poor white neighborhood. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, and I had no idea these people were racist or prejudiced. They were nice to me in the beginning, but when I wouldn't play the inferior black person role, they decided to try to take me down a notch. It seemed that some ignorant white people think that they could always use racism to get to a black person. And actually, a racist guy, he actually felt comfortable enough to tell me that the way to get to a black person was to call him or her the N-word. And he said this to me like he was revealing a secret. And I think it was because I had been on his side when a black person was rude to him, and he must have mistaken me for a sellout. So I had no idea how to respond to him. I didn't laugh, and I walked away confused. I had no idea he was racist. He didn't come off like that at all. So I have a feeling that these racists were trying to put me in my place using racism to injure me. During my stay in that apartment, I was called the N-word several times by different racists. There were two main things that prevented the racists from getting to me. So one was my culture didn't, and I don't think even now, doesn't have the N-word. It does not exist in my language, and my family never knew about the word until coming to America. It wasn't something that we associated with ourselves. It was something that ignorant white people called African Americans. We knew that it could be extended to us because we could be perceived as black and recognized it as an insult, but it didn't have the same sting as it would have to an African American, because African Americans have had very real and horrific experiences with that word. In other words, there was no history with the N word in my culture. It was new to me and my family. My family was raised in an environment where our ethnicity was the majority. There were little to few whites. We knew racists existed, and some whites were ignorant. So we weren't naive about that. However, the environment wouldn't allow racism or racists to be tolerated. And many white people that we encountered actually treated us as equals. And that leads me to the second reason. White people treated me as an equal. The environment I grew up in valued diversity and respected all cultures. Not saying that there was absolutely no racism or prejudice, it just wasn't tolerated. And many respectable whites actually taught me how to deal with racism. And those are the main reasons that made it hard for racists to talk down to me or injure me with their ignorance or racism. Back to the apartment. I had cleaned the toilet but left it wet with water, and the guy who lived in the room next to mine complained to the maintenance guy. They both knew it was water and that I had cleaned the toilet. So one day the maintenance guy came upstairs and the guy next door was complaining to him about the toilet seat being wet. And the maintenance guy said to him, "Well, maybe that's how Africans clean toilets," and starts laughing. I never told him my ethnicity, so he was using the term African to replace blacks because I guess saying blacks would sound too racist. He came by to talk to me, and after he spoke to him, he came by to talk to me, but he didn't know that I heard him. So he greeted me pleasantly and asked and started a conversation, but he didn't talk about the toilet seat, so he just started talking to me about random stuff. And I'm a pretty straightforward person, so I decided to ask him about that comment. He was shocked, and he didn't know what to say, and I let him know it was offensive. And he pulled himself together, and he said that he said it to get on the other guy's good side, and that he was just playing politics. He didn't really mean anything bad by it. He apologized, and I decided to not press the issue. I kept talking to him because he was the maintenance guy, and I would have to talk to him for that reason. We sometimes had small talk in front of the building or when he came by to fix something or check on the place. And you could say that he was nice to me sometimes. And then all of a sudden he started hitting on me, and I couldn't believe it. And I wouldn't give him the chance to directly hit on me, so he went around it in several ways. So he even tried to get me to move in with him as roommates, of course, right? He kept hitting on me until he got a girlfriend. And he broke up with her a few months later because the jealous girl he had a fling with that also lived in the same apartment chased her away. I overheard, after they broke up and everything, I overheard someone ask him if he would choose his ex or me, and they didn't know that I heard them. And he quickly replied that he would pick me. And his friend was shocked, and so was I. His girlfriend was a fairly attractive white girl, and most of his friends probably thought that she was attractive too. And I was shocked that he answered so quickly that he would pick me instead. But that was one concrete incident of being hit on by someone who I definitely knew had racist tendencies. The next incident happened with the guy next door. And what happened was that he and I finally got into an argument, and we got into several arguments after that. And he decided to run me out of the apartment. He tried to intimidate me. He told me he was going to drive me crazy. And he was just plain scary. I told the landlord what was going on. Every time I came out of my room, he would come out and sit in the kitchen. And his excuse was that he had the right to use the kitchen like everyone else. He never sat in the kitchen that much before. So after a series of these intimidating acts, one day he says, adios, right? And as I was leaving, and under normal circumstances, that wouldn't be perceived as racist, but he thought I was Spanish and was kind of making fun of that. So after more intimidating and more intimidation, and he never really came out and said anything racist. You know, he was just like trying to intimidate me. And seeing that I was a bit rattled by his behavior, he felt even more emboldened. So he would sit in the kitchen because my room was close to the kitchen, and he would say things to try to get me to argue with him. At first I did argue with him, but then after a while I just stopped arguing with him and I ignored him. And so one day after his little game, one day he goes, after he was doing that, he says, out of nowhere, he goes, you know what? You're not that bad looking if you didn't have that mouth on you. I was like, what? I didn't say anything. I was just a bit confused. And I was like, was I supposed to be flattered? I didn't say that to him. I said nothing. I just ignored him and I walked out. He kept on talking as if I would be interested in him. I went into my room and I closed the door quietly. I did not respond to him. I showed no expression. And so finally, the landlord finally moved him to the apartment next door because he was crazy. Like, she had enough of his BS and everything like that, and he wouldn't stop bothering me. So there was, in the other apartment, there was an ignorant black guy in that apartment, and they seemed to get along for a little while. The ignorant black guy was a middle-aged guy who was definitely ignorant, but not hood radish. That was after his time, so that's why I'm not calling him hood radish. And he didn't, and unlike the manager from the other video, he didn't act, like a hood rat. So I didn't see him so much as that. He was ignorant, but he was not like hood radish. So I heard bits and pieces of their interactions because the walls were thin and they were loud, him and the guy that moved back there. And it seemed like the ignorant black guy bullied him a lot, bullied the guy who moved back there, who used to live next door to me. And so the guy who used to live next door to me started calling the guy the N-word. And he kept doing that, and the landlord told him to stop, but he wouldn't stop. Then one day, the ignorant black guy beat him up so bad that he had to be taken away in an ambulance. So the ignorant black guy got kicked out, and the other guy, the racist guy, he returned to the apartment. So I know that he was definitely a racist, and he definitely did try to hit on me. So those are so I had many instances of people who I thought could be racist hitting on me, but those are incidents where I definitely knew, yeah, this guy has racist tendencies, and yeah, this guy is definitely a racist. And so those are the two incidents that I'm sharing with you because those are concrete. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So those are my real life concrete experiences being hit on by a guy with racist tendencies and a guy who really was a racist. So 2 more examples of the hypocrisy of racists comes from history. There is a story of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, where a racist slave master had a relationship and a family with his mulatto slave. I don't know if mulatto is acceptable term or not. If it is, then I'm sorry. His biracial slave. I don't like the word biracial, bi-ethnic. I don't know. I'll just say mulatto, and if it's offensive, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be. So yeah, so that's one example of, concrete example of a racist having a relationship with a woman of color, not necessarily fully black. And then there's also the story of Strom Thurmond. He was the pro-segregation racist politician who fought hard against the civil rights movement while he had a secret mixed child. So he had a child with his family's housekeeper, and but he took care of the child, made sure the child got an education and everything like that. They just didn't let anybody know that that was his child until he died, and that's when his daughter came out, his mixed daughter came out and admitted that he was her father. And so that's a big thing. And everybody knew him as a racist and a pro-segregationist. He used the N-word and everything. So that was pretty surprising. So you could imagine like someone calling him a racist and he denies it by saying, I have a mixed kid. Like he could totally do that. Of course, he was a proud racist and he probably wouldn't deny it. That's because being racist was acceptable back in those times. In modern times, he would have to backtrack a bit, and then he probably would use his mixed child to fend off allegations that he was racist. So, ironically, the other day I came upon a podcast about a neo-Nazi group where the journalist was talking to a member of a neo-Nazi group, he was from an acceleration group called The Base, and he admitted that he was in a relationship with a black woman. And the neo-Nazi, tells the journalist that there was a pregnancy scare, and if he had had a child with the black woman, the child would have been half human. Here's the audio.
At this point, he starts telling me about his past relationship, and he reveals to me that his ex was a person of color, was a black woman. And the sense I get when he's opening up to me about this is like he's confessing something, or he's like unburdening himself a little bit. And then he tells me this horrific anecdote where he says, yeah, like towards the end of the relationship, there was a pregnancy scare. And he might have even said that she had lied about being pregnant or something. So for a while, Patrick thought he was going to have a child with this woman. And then he tells me, he says, the only problem is the child only would have been half human, which was, just a disgusting comment. And then I remember he added, yeah, having a mulatto child would have been a fucking nightmare. And so again, it's just like, okay, this is the level of racism that this guy has fallen into. These are kind of the depths of his bigotry, where he was in a relationship with this person, but if he had had a child with them, he thinks that only half of it would have been human. So he looks at his ex as subhuman in some sense.
The link to that podcast is in this YouTube video's description box. So now, when I strongly suspect someone of being racist, I have a black girlfriend, I have a black boyfriend, or I have a mixed child statement doesn't let them off the hook. The point of sharing my experiences was to show the hypocrisy of racist males or females, and it was also to show that the racism problem isn't so black and white. There are a lot of intricacies that need to be looked at and considered, or else we'll be going in circles again. And that's all for today.